August 24th, 1955, in Mississippi, an African-American 14-year-old boy named Emmett Till supposedly flirted with a white woman. 4 days later, her husband, Roy Bryant, came home from business travel. The husband soon figured out about how an African-American boy supposedly flirted with his wife. He wanted revenge, so he contacted his brother-in-law, J.W. Millam, and they created a plan. August 28th, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam kidnapped Emmett from his great-uncle's house. They threw Emmett into the back of their truck and took him to a secluded barn by the Tallahatchie River. They ordered Emmett to take off his clothes. They then proceeded to brutally beat him and ended his life with a gunshot to the head. They then tied up Emmett's body with barbed wire to a cotton gin fan and threw him into the Tallahatchie River. A couple days later, the police recovered Emmett's body. His great-uncle could only identify Emmett by recognizing an initialed ring he wore. 2 weeks after Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam killed Emmett Till, they went to court in a segregated courthouse. The all-white jury only debated for 67 minutes, deciding that the men were not guilty, because the state could not identify the body. This cruel case of a brutal murder brought to light how cruel the Jim Crow laws were in the South, and this case was also an early moving force of the African American civil rights movement. The Brown versus Board of Education case is a name given to 5 separate cases heard by the Supreme Court concerning the issue of segregation. These 5 cases were Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Bridge versus Elliott, David versus Board of Education of Prince Edward County, Boyling versus Sharp, and Gaypart versus Ethel. Thurgood Marshall was a lawyer for the case of Brown versus Board of Education. His defense was that the separation of black and white schools were inherently unequal, violating the Equal Protection Clause, which is the 14th Amendment. On May 14, 1954, the Supreme Court concluded that the black and white schools were inherently unequal. And on May 31, 1955, justices handed down on how desegregation of schools were going to proceed. Although it took many years to desegregate schools, this case was responsible for getting the process underway.
An African-American civil rights activist, Homer Plessy, was in a white section of a train cart. Although he was light-skinned, under Louisiana state law he was black. Plessy was jailed for breaking the Separate Car Act, a law segregated common passengers on the railroad. Plessy's lawyers argued that the Separate Car Act violated the 13th and 14th Amendment. Louisiana countered the argument by saying that the state had the power of the 10th Amendment, which is to create laws that preserve order in public places. After the case, the separate but equal doctrine was quickly extended to cover many other areas of public life, such as restaurants, theaters, restrooms, and public schools.
On Thursday, November 9, 1933, the Monroeville Journal reported that Naomi Lowry had told authorities that Walter Lett had raped her on the previous Thursday near a brick factory south of Monroeville. Fearing an attempt of lynching by the white mob, Sheriff Sawyer took Lett to the jail in Greenville for safekeeping until the trial. The trial was brief, where he pled not guilty. Walter Lett's execution was originally set for May 11th in 1934. Some people on the jury did not sit well with him being executed. The Alabama Board of Pardons and Governor Miller pushed back his execution in order to give him a smaller retrial. Finally, Lett's sentence was changed from death in the electric chair to life in imprisonment. 3 years later, he died of tuberculosis.